Hi, it's Katrina. I have some breaking news for you. There are some footprints that date back to 6 million years ago. There's a new species and some new info on the Romans. Here are some incredible recent discoveries. The Sakara Necropolis. Archaeologists in Egypt recently embarked on an incredible excavation project to uncover the secrets of a royal priest at the most famous necropolis in the country. Yes, you know, I'm talking about Sakara. Researchers found a unique collection of lion, cat, and crocodile mummies. The weird animal mummies were only the tip of the iceberg. According to the Egyptian Minister of Antiquities, Khaled el-Enani, so many relics were found in the Grand Tomb that they could fill an entire museum. 25 wooden boxes decorated in gorgeous hieroglyphics were found to be filled with mummified felines. There were also 77 boxes filled with bronze cat statues. When investigating the cat mummies, researchers noticed a few of them were a bit bigger than the others. They did CT scans and confirmed that they were no ordinary house cats. These were lion cubs that had been meticulously mummified. What do you think the mysterious priest did to deserve being buried with boxes of mummified cats and cat statues? What was the point in mummifying lion cubs? If you don't know, neither do the experts. Archaeologists also discovered scarabs made of wood and sandstone and crocodile statues. Not to mention crocodile statues with the remains of mummified crocodiles encased inside of them. Plus, dozens of god statues were found, including 73 bronze statues of Osiris. And there were also mummified scarab beetles and mummified cobras. The experts don't have any idea who the royal priest was, nor why his tomb was so lavish. All they know is that he lived 4,000 years ago and was probably closely related to Egyptian royalty. Ancient relatives. What would you do if you found out you were related to someone who lived in a cave almost 8,000 years ago? Would you start sporting a bearskin robe and walking around with a wooden club? If you happen to live in Japan or Korea, you might have to ask yourself this very question. Scientists recently extracted DNA from teeth and bones found inside a spooky cave called Devil's Gate. It's located deep in the mountains of Russia's eastern coast. The site was occupied about 9,000 years ago by a primitive group of Homo sapiens. The bones and teeth came from a pair of women who died 7,700 years ago. Along with human remains, archaeologists identified bone tools and woven grass that had been made into textiles. But it was the DNA that scientists were most interested in. Researchers from the University of Cambridge found a shocking resemblance between the Devil's Gate DNA and the modern populations of Japan and Korea. This study came as a huge shock because it shows that the last few surviving descendants of two cave women are practically the entire populations of Japan and Korea. The new Anaconda. In the Amazon rainforest, the biggest species of snake in the world thrives. The green anaconda can grow to be over 500 pounds, with the longest growing to nearly 30 feet long. Other than the prehistoric titanoboa that was an actual monster, the anaconda is the biggest snake that's ever existed. Now, there are two of them. Just days ago, it was announced that a new species of green anaconda was discovered in the Amazon. But the circumstances surrounding the discovery are really bizarre. Will Smith, of all people, was involved. Brian Fry is an explorer with National Geographic and a biologist at the University of Queensland. He traveled across Ecuador, Venezuela, and Brazil collecting blood and tissue samples from wild green anacondas. This was all part of a new National Geographic documentary with Will Smith on Disney+. At the laboratory, Brian and his team scrutinized the samples they collected. They also compared notes they had taken in the field when they had studied each animal with the scrutiny of Gordon Ramsay studying your homemade spaghetti. Scientists counted the individual scales on the anacondas and looked for traits that would suggest the snakes were different species. This work was not as pleasant as you might think. Anacondas live in muddy swamps deep in the forests. To count their individual scales involves diving into marshes and rivers and manhandling dangerous predators. Would you have what it takes to poke and prod at a 500-pound serpent that could eat you alive? Physically speaking, all the anacondas that Brian Fry and his team looked at were identical. But when the scientists ran the genetic data, they found two distinct species. Some of the snakes they looked at were genetically 5.5% different. That doesn't seem like much, but take this into consideration. You are only 2% different from a chimpanzee. Even though the anacondas look similar enough to be the same species, they are twice as genetically separate as humans from chimps. And so, in a shocking turn of events, a documentary starring Will Smith led to the discovery of an entirely new snake. Now there is the northern green anaconda and the southern green anaconda. You're welcome. Footprints in Crete. Footprints on the Greek island of Crete have been dated to 6.05 million years old. That's an incredible timeline, considering the footprints appear to have been left by humans. If mainstream science is to be believed, humans didn't evolve until at least 3 million years ago. These mysterious footprints, which you can see for yourself here, appear to be evidence that scientists need to rearrange their understanding of human evolution. There are 50 footprints altogether, first identified in 2002. At the time of discovery, they were thought to be about 5.7 million years old. It was only recently that scientists properly dated them. Now, experts are scrambling to make sense of the data. It's total anarchy! There are a lot of good reasons why the footprints are shaking up the scientific community. First and foremost, they were clearly left by hominins, some sort of bipedal creature similar to a human. Environmental scientist Matthew Robert Bennett said the footprints are small tracks made by someone walking upright on two legs. Notice that Matthew said someone instead of something. These are human tracks fossilized in stone. Because the tracks are in Greece, not Africa, it would mean that humans didn't evolve in Africa. The footprints are 2.5 million years older than Lucy's footprints. Lucy is the famous Australopithecus afarensis who was discovered in Tanzania. At over 3 million years old, Lucy was considered the oldest known hominin, which meant that humans originated in Africa. The tracks in Crete disprove this theory. Instead of Africa, humans may have started out on the island of Crete. And what a spectacular place to begin! Crete has been home to magnificent civilizations over the years. Some believe that Crete was home to the Atlanteans. It was definitely home to the Minoans, and even the legend of the Minoan Minotaur. It's still too early to say for certain what the deal is with the footprints. They are definitely going to change history, but scientists still have a lot of investigating to do. Maybe they belong to humanoid aliens. Maybe a civilization of humans that rose and fell like the Roman Empire. Or maybe your very own great, well, you get the picture. Calendar Rock. On the border of Colorado and Utah, archaeologists have found what may have been the earliest calendar used north of Mexico. Spiral petroglyphs carved into the wall of a canyon are changing history. The site is called Castle Rock Pueblo, located on the Mesa Verde Plateau. It's a place known for its ancient settlements, which were occupied by the Anasazi culture almost 800 years ago. The Anasazi, also known as the ancestral Puebloans, were a highly advanced culture that developed agriculture across the American Southwest. They didn't exactly have thick forests to work with like medieval Europeans. Instead, they used what was at their disposal. With nothing but mud and rocks, the indigenous peoples slapped together medieval-style townhouses and entire blocks of apartment complexes. They built vast cities and covered the canyons with rock art. Archaeologists were investigating the canyons above the ancient settlements when they found the new carvings. Lead researcher Radoslav Palonka from Poland said what they found surpassed their wildest expectations. It was assumed the canyons had already been meticulously studied by American scientists, but that didn't turn out to be the case. When Palonka looked a little off the beaten trail, she and her team found completely new petroglyphs. The petroglyphs are mostly spiral motifs, some of them 3 feet in diameter. They may have been used as early calendars to mark down astronomical observations. Researchers aren't sure how the calendars worked, though they likely tracked important days like the winter and summer solstices. Mini-moons. In 2006, NASA astronomers discovered something strange floating in the orbit of our planet. There are thousands of satellites that litter Earth's orbit like a galactic garbage dump. Researchers at the Catalina Sky Survey in Arizona noticed one satellite that didn't match the others. It wasn't made by humans. This satellite was a mini-moon. What in the world is a mini-moon, and how could it help humans become an interplanetary species? Mini-moons are not real moons, but rather small chunks of rock about the size of a car. An asteroid, more or less, just hovering in our orbit. Mini-moons also don't stay in Earth's orbit forever. They usually circle the planet for about a year and then are ejected from orbit, like a troublemaker being ejected from a bar at 3 o'clock in the morning. In 2016, the Catalina Sky Survey discovered their second mini-moon. In 2020, it was ejected from orbit. Scientists have been carefully paying attention for more mini-moons to show up. It's believed these cosmic visitors could serve as stepping stones while people slowly explore the galaxy. Humanity is still struggling to touch the stars. One of the biggest issues is that to go anywhere in outer space, a spaceship's velocity has to change. It takes a tremendous amount of velocity to get into space, but not to go places in space itself because of the lack of gravity. Do you see where I'm going with these mini-moons? Imagine if a spaceship could take off from space instead of Earth. This would require significantly less fuel to blast off. There is a potential future in which mini-moons are converted into temporary fuel depots for spaceships. Is this crazy talk, or are you having visions of a sci-fi future right now? Scientists really think that near-Earth asteroids will serve as space gas stations in the future. Maybe not now, and maybe not in a decade, but mini-moons could change the course of space travel. Armageddon. An incredible new discovery has been made at Armageddon that has shocked the world. A military encampment used by the Romans 1,800 years ago was unearthed at the place where, according to the Bible, the final battle against evil will be fought. Or has it already been fought? What you might not know is that the word Armageddon only appears once in the Bible. It comes from the Hebrew word for Mount Megiddo. I know it can seem confusing, but that's the Bible for you. The book has been translated between so many languages that words and names get mixed up sometimes. All you really need to know is that Armageddon is located at the ancient ruin of Tel Megiddo in Israel. Armageddon doesn't mean apocalypse, it's just the name of a place. According to the book of Revelations, the forces of good will meet at Armageddon, led by Jesus Christ riding on a white horse. The forces of evil will also show up at Armageddon, led by the beast and the false prophet, and foul kings led by the Antichrist. It will be a battle even more epic than the final battle in Lord of the Rings, as if you can believe that. The Bible says the end of the battle is already determined. God's enemies will be defeated, consumed by fire from heaven. Then the apocalypse can continue until the world is born anew. What if the Bible's great battle at Armageddon already happened almost 2,000 years ago? The camp found at Armageddon was home to 5,000 soldiers with the 6th Ironclad Legion. Yotam Tepper with the Israel Antiquities Authority said it was in use by the Roman army for 200 years. It was a permanent military stronghold from 117 to 300 AD. Archaeologists haven't found proof of any epic battles. Although, to be fair, archaeologists hadn't anticipated finding something so amazing. The Roman garrison was discovered during a project to expand a nearby road. It seems suspicious to have such a concentrated military force at a place where the final biblical battle is supposed to take place. Scholars are wondering if maybe there wasn't a battle that happened here already. Maybe the ancient battle was used as inspiration for the biblical story of Armageddon. But then, who did the Romans fight? Marshenge. More proof that aliens once lived on the surface of Mars has been revealed. High-resolution images of the Martian surface show what appears to be a Stonehenge-like monument at the top of a raised mound. People are calling it Marshenge. You can see clearly in this picture that the mound is in the middle of a vast desert. There is nothing around for miles except this one hill. It could be natural, or it could be an earthen mound made by an ancient civilization. I'm thinking about Cahokia or the Ocmulgee National Monument and other similar mounds across America. That's what the mound on the red planet looks like. It's a little too perfect to be natural. But it's not the mound that has everyone in an uproar. It's the blatant fact that in the pictures taken by satellites, you can see a ring of stone at the top of the mound. It looks like a purposely constructed cluster of stones. A ritual site maybe? Or maybe it's a monument commemorating a Martian king's victory. It could even have been used as a meeting place for whoever lived on Mars before it turned into a vapid wasteland. NASA has not come forward to confirm that there is a Stonehenge-like monument on Mars. It's probably not something the space organization is going to do anytime soon, although that would be pretty cool of them. Right now, we can only speculate as to whether Mars was truly home to a civilization millions of years ago. What do you think about this? Let me know in the comments. Alexander the Great's father. In more earthly news, archaeologists have confirmed the discovery of King Philip II. No, not King Philip of Spain. I'm talking about Alexander the Great's father, the mighty king of Macedon. In 1977, archaeologists in northern Greece were excavating the ancient town of Vergina. They uncovered a trio of royal tombs that were absolutely pristine. The tombs contained the bodies of Alexander the Great's close blood relatives. At the time, scientists didn't have the best technology. They figured the tomb was from the 4th century BC. It was guessed that the bodies belonged to Alexander's father, his son, and his half-brother, but nobody knew which skeleton belonged to which family members. Recently, the scientists used modern tech to solve the mystery once and for all. It turned out the skeleton that was identified as Alexander's half-brother was in fact the skeleton of his father. This was confirmed by researchers at the Democritus University of Thrace. Professor Antonios Bartsiokas hailed the skeletons as some of the most historically important bones in Europe. How much do you know about Alexander's father? With how much attention Alexander has gotten, you probably know a few facts about him. Such facts as Alexander was the king of Macedon, which at the time of his ascension to the throne in 336 BC was little more than a state in ancient Greece. By the time Alexander died in 323 BC, Macedon was a world power. Alexander had destroyed the Persians, captured Egypt, and stretched the territory of Greece farther than anyone before him. Before all this happened, Macedon was ruled by King Philip II. He was assassinated in 336 BC, leaving the empire to his son. But why was Alexander's father, Philip II, his brother, Philip III, and his son, Alexander IV, buried in a tomb in Greece without Alexander? It's all part of the great mystery behind Greece's most legendary general. Nobody knows where Alexander was buried. Maybe in Greece, maybe in Egypt. Maybe his body was thrown into the sea. Archaeologists have been searching for Alexander's tomb for centuries and have never found a trace of it. Flying ticks. I'm going to tell you about a discovery now that is going to haunt your dreams. This study involves one of humanity's most detested creatures. Not flies or vampires, but ticks. The terrible tick. The little brownish-red creature that literally buries its head into your skin and sucks your blood, and can give you Lyme disease. A new study has proven, much to everyone's horror, that ticks can fly. They can't jump, which is why they don't play basketball, but ticks can soar through the air thanks to a boost from static electricity. What even is a tick? If you live in a place like New York City, you may have never seen one in your entire life. But if you are a fan of the great outdoors, you've undoubtedly succumbed to a tick bite or two while skipping through a field of tall grass. A tick is an arachnid, a close relative of the spider, but technically a parasite. They can't survive without drinking blood from other animals. As biologist Sam England notes, the most important thing in a tick's life is finding a host to feed on. But it's a tough job because they can't jump. They have to dangle themselves off tall strands of grass with their legs outstretched, waiting for something big to come along. The new study revealed that tiny ticks can shoot their bodies through the air when exposed to static electricity. The friction of your movement through tall grass creates a small amount of static, which the tick uses like a superhero to defy gravity and latch its hooks into your skin. Nobody ever knew this until now. Quite frankly, I'm not sure I even wanted to know. Tatooine discovered. 1,300 light-years away in a binary star system, Bebop 1c is an unusual planet. It's 65 times the size of Earth. It's also a gas giant, and a weird copy of a planet you might be familiar with. Yet again, science has blended with science fiction. This mysterious new exoplanet could be a real-world version of Tatooine from Star Wars. Matthew Standing, a researcher from the Open University in England, called it an exciting discovery. Matthew said it's the only circumbinary planet ever found with a radial velocity. Don't worry, I'm going to unpack this. I understand these are not terms that normal people keep stored in their brains, including me. Circumbinary planet is a term that describes a planet in a binary solar system, meaning a solar system that has two stars. Bebop 1c is sandwiched between two stars that revolve around one another in an incredibly inhospitable zone. The Milky Way has only one star, our lovely Sun. Earth is at the perfect distance away from the Sun not to be burned by it. Mercury is not so lucky, being cooked by the Sun because it's so close. The newly found Tatooine is in an even worse position because it's sandwiched between two incredibly hot stars. You can think of it like standing between two open ovens, or more accurately, like adding another sun to the Milky Way. The result is a planet just like Tatooine, where Luke Skywalker was raised. It's hot, inhospitable, and two suns rage in the sky. Mount Vesuvius and Pliny the Elder. Keeping it hot, let's take a trip to Mount Vesuvius, traveling back in time to the year 79 AD, when the mountain erupted. The volcano spewed hot magma and toxic gas into the sky, destroying the city of Pompeii and devastating the rest of the region. Even if you're familiar with Mount Vesuvius and the destruction of Pompeii, you might not know about a good friend of mine named Gaius Plinius Secundus, aka Pliny the Elder. He was the most important historian of the 1st century. He also happened to be present for the eruption of Vesuvius. The volcano killed an estimated 16,000 people, including Pliny the Elder. Archaeologists in Italy may have just found the house where Pliny watched the eruption unfold. The remains of a luxurious villa were discovered in the town of Bacoli. 2,000 years ago, Bacoli was a port city where Pliny the Elder had command of a small Roman naval fleet. When the eruption shook the earth, Pliny saw it happen in real time. He immediately ran down to the docks. There, he sailed from Bacoli in the direction of disaster. He was hoping to rescue people and learn more about the incredible natural phenomenon. It didn't work out, though. His son, aptly named Pliny the Younger, wrote that his dear old dad died hours later. Pliny and his rescue team were overcome by toxic gas spewing from the volcano. Pliny the Younger watched it all unfold from the safety of his villa in Bacoli. It was a tragic end to an important man. So much of Roman history is known because of Pliny's work recording great events and describing the various peoples of the known world. Now, archaeologists think they've discovered his home, which is a huge deal. The villa that's being excavated matches Pliny's description of his own home. It also has an excellent view of Mount Vesuvius about 20 miles across the bay. It was discovered by happenstance during the construction of a playground of all things. The legendary Blue Dragon. 72 million years ago, there were worse monstrosities than sharks cruising the Pacific Ocean. Researchers in Japan recently discovered a prehistoric leviathan of epic proportions. It was so ferocious that paleontologists are calling it the Blue Dragon. In reality, the creature was a mosasaur. It was a marine reptile and apex predator with nothing to fear. The Blue Dragon was even scarier than most mosasaurs. It had extra long flippers to make it faster. It also had a dorsal fin to give it better mobility, which is something most other mosasaurs lacked. It wasn't particularly bulky, only the size of a great white shark, no biggie. The Blue Dragon was also packing some serious gear. It was quick, could turn on a dime, and was ruthless. Researchers discovered fossils of this beast in Wakayama Prefecture. Its real name is Wakayama Soryu, but it translates to mean blue dragon. It may not have flown in the sky, but neither did dragons in Japanese mythology. In Japanese myth, dragons were aquatic. Medieval Europe had huge dragons that lived in caves, coveted gold, and breathed fire. Ancient China had long, serpentine dragons that flew through the skies. But in Japan, dragons were associated with water and rain. They were depicted as giant, wingless sea serpents. Which ancient dragon do you think is the scariest? The Isle of Arran. Last August, archaeologists teamed up with local volunteers in Drumadune to excavate the only complete Neolithic Cursus monument in Britain. Hold on, where is Drumadune and what is a Neolithic Cursus? That's Cursus with a U, not an E. Drumadune is on the Isle of Arran, located in the isolated northern reaches of Scotland. A cursus is a huge rectangular enclosure from the Stone Age that was used for processions and ceremonies. Unlike a stone circle, Stonehenge as an example, a cursus was humongous. Some of them were over 6 miles long. The cursus discovered on Arran is less than a mile long, so it's not the most impressive one in the world, but it is the only one found in Britain. It's bordered by ditches and embankments located near the Macri Moor stone circles. It was placed strategically to bring ancient pilgrims from Macri Moor up the coastline. The best thing I could compare it to maybe would be the Avenue of Sphinxes in Egypt, which was used during festivals thousands of years ago. The Scottish cursus was also a long avenue. It would have guided visitors from the majestic stone circle to somewhere else. Perhaps it led them to a banquet hall where mead flowed and someone in a green cape played the harp. As for its age, experts figure the cursus was built 6,000 years ago. Kenny Brophy from Glasgow University thinks it would have taken decades for a small local group to complete the project. So far, only 1% of it has been excavated. There is so much more to learn about the early people of Scotland. Archaeologists better get cracking. The Whistling Sea. The Caribbean Sea is making a noise so loud that it can be heard from space. Scientists at the University of Liverpool identified the noise as sounding like a great big dog whistle. How can a noise be heard from space? Isn't the whole thing about space that sound doesn't travel? If you want to get technical about things, explosions and laser guns are completely silent in space, rendering every science fiction movie egregiously incorrect. In this case, though, the whistling of the Caribbean Sea is picked up by instruments in space that observe the Earth's gravity field. The whistling sound appears in oscillations. Researchers call it the Rossby whistle. To identify the bizarre noise, researchers looked at sea levels and pressure readings taken from between 1958 and 2013. They also used modern information to look at tide gauges and gravity measurements. They found that the whistle noise is created when a large wave, known as a Rossby wave, hits the sea floor. The science here can be incredibly confusing. The key thing to know is that waves at the bottom of the ocean are creating such chaos that they affect the gravity field of the planet. Satellites have picked up the change in gravity and noticed it has a sound to it. The chaos of the water sloshing in the sea plays a note of A flat. How weird is this world that we live in? A pollinating frog. If I were to tell you that frogs pollinate flowers, would you laugh at the ridiculous idea? Until very recently, scientists would have laughed along with you. But now, nobody's laughing. A small Brazilian tree frog was recently found in the jungle pollinating flowers like a bumblebee. It's crazy how much science flip-flops. Nobody would have anticipated an adorable orange tree frog becoming the world's newest pollinator. This amphibian is too cute for words with its goopy yellow fingers and coy little smile. It's called the Xenohyla truncate tree frog, a resident of the coastal forest outside Rio de Janeiro. Most frogs in the jungle here feast on flying insects, but not our fascinating orange friend. This frog is a vegetarian with a sweet tooth. Instead of hunting, it spends its nights leisurely slurping sugary nectar from the white flowers of the milk fruit tree. Some frogs are hunters, other frogs are gatherers. That just seems to be the way it goes. Insects and birds are already known to be major pollinators. Now it turns out that frogs might play a role in pollinating flowers too, while slurping their nectar. Scientists need to completely reevaluate their understanding of pollination in the natural world. There's a lot going on that we still don't know about. Ancient slaughter. All this talk of hunting and gathering has reminded me of a truly morbid discovery recently made in Sweden. Scientists at Lund University discovered the truth behind what happened to the hunter-gatherers of Europe in the Stone Age. I'm going to warn you, it wasn't pretty. Scientists have been spending a lot of time analyzing skeletons and teeth from prehistoric people discovered across Scandinavia. They've been pulling DNA from the ancient remains of folks who were the earliest farmers in Northern Europe. What researchers found was a sudden turnover in the population approximately 5,900 years ago. By turnover, I mean a wave of newcomers displaced the original population. To give you a more modern example, the arrival of Christopher Columbus resulted in a turnover of the American population. And just like with Christopher Columbus, what happened 5,900 years ago in Europe was violent. Up until now, anthropologists had one prevailing theory about the emergence of early farming. It was believed hunter-gatherers mixed with farmers from foreign lands and peacefully integrated. The new study shows the transition wasn't all butterflies and rainbows. Instead, a mysterious group of farmers arrived in Denmark. These farmers came from distant lands, likely far in the east. When they arrived, hunter-gatherers had been living fairly peacefully for centuries. The farmers showed up with their cattle and technology, destroyed the hunter-gatherers, and took over the land. Those who weren't killed through conflict perished because of pathogens unleashed by the newcomers and their livestock. This was hugely similar to what happened when Europeans arrived in the New World, only it was in the Stone Age. Then it happened again 4,850 years ago. The farming culture that arrived from a different realm and killed the hunter-gatherers was wiped out by the arrival of the Yamnaya culture from southern Russia. The Yamnaya replaced the farmers, who had replaced the hunter-gatherers using violence and the introduction of new diseases. Long story short, populations change constantly in this world. When a new group arrives in a new land, they have an uncanny tendency to replace the locals. This new discovery is shocking because it proves the pattern has been repeating itself since the dawn of civilization.
Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
The Clearest UFO. In August of 1990, a pair of hikers near Calvine, Scotland, took a picture of something strange hovering in the sky. The object is believed to have been a UFO. The picture became internationally famous after it was taken and developed. However, for unknown reasons, it was lost for decades. For the first time in 30 years, the picture has now been rediscovered and revealed once again to the public. There is no disputing what can be seen in the photograph. It's a metallic diamond-shaped object hovering in the sky, with what seems to be a fighter jet flying directly behind it. According to the original photographers, the object was emitting a low hum, and it hovered completely still for at least 10 minutes. They took 6 pictures of the UFO and shared them with the Daily Record in Scotland. The newspaper then handed them over to the Ministry of Defense, and for some bizarre reason, the photographs disappeared. During this time, they didn't have the luxury of digital images, so the negatives had to be developed. Once they got into the hands of the Ministry of Defense, they went missing for 32 years. It wasn't until Associate Professor David Clark began investigating that he managed to track one of the prints back to Officer Craig Lindsay. This man was formerly with the Royal Air Force, and he'd been holding on to an original print of the spacecraft for all of these years. What we now have is the clearest UFO picture ever taken. However, the government of the UK is not interested in investigating UFOs since they do not consider them a military threat. Those in charge still insist that the unidentified flying object in this picture is nothing but an optical illusion. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Pits on the moon. Scientists have discovered mysterious pits on the moon that they believe would be perfect for colonization purposes. In an absolutely bizarre twist, lunar scientists have discovered mysterious holes on the moon's surface, about 200 of them in total, and they are consistently around the average temperature of San Francisco. What this means is that if people are ever going to populate the moon, they could do it inside these craters. The only known places on the lunar surface that remotely resemble any kind of environment on our planet are these craters. Having a stable temperature will make settlements on the moon much easier to maintain, and it means that the first off-world human civilization could be a lot closer than we ever thought possible. The temperature on the moon is anything but ordinary. During the day, some parts of the moon can heat up to a whopping 260 degrees Fahrenheit. When the moon moves out of the sunlight, the temperature can drop to a freezing minus 280 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a difference of 540 degrees, which would make life on the moon extremely challenging. And yet these strange lunar pits are a consistent 63 degrees Fahrenheit, whether it's night or day, making them perfect for human survival. Tyler Horvath from the University of California says one of the hardest parts about building a base on the moon is the night. Apparently, the amount of energy it takes to heat a structure during the lunar night is immense. However, that problem would be totally mitigated if the bases were built inside the lunar pits. Scientists believe these craters could be sinkholes leading down into collapsed lava tubes. The lava tubes are left over from billions of years ago, when the moon was a volcanic nightmare, a space rock covered in a dark sea of boiling magma. The 12 Labors of Heracles. Excavations in the ancient city of Sidra, whose history dates back 2,900 years, have revealed a floor mosaic displaying one of the most famous heroes in human history, Heracles. From Greek mythology, Heracles is most known by his Roman name of Hercules. The mosaic was discovered in an ancient Roman bath located in Turkey, and it shows Heracles as he performs his 12 labors. The original Greek myth of Heracles is one of tragedy. He was the son of Zeus and a mortal woman, born with unimaginable strength. However, Zeus's wife Hera was jealous of the demigod for being the product of one of her husband's affairs. In order to enact revenge, Hera imposed a fit of madness onto Heracles, and as a result, he accidentally murdered his wife, Megara. Heracles was so distraught by his actions that he embarked on a quest of redemption to be absolved of his terrible crime. His quest involved 12 labors in total. Greek legend says Heracles traveled all over the world fighting monsters like the Lernaean Hydra, the Cretan bull, the wild Erymanthian boar, and the Nemean lion. This was one of the most popular stories in ancient Greece, and we can see it play out in this ancient mosaic that was just recently discovered. One of the best preserved scenes displayed on this piece of art is of Heracles strangling the fierce Nemean lion. Waterworld. Scientists have discovered a new planet about 100 light-years from Earth that's covered completely by a thick layer of water. It's an ocean planet, slightly larger than Earth, and sits at the exact sweet spot from its star to support life. The planet was found thanks to PhD student Charles Cadieux from the University of Montreal, using NASA's Planet Hunter spacecraft. This instrument is equipped with 4 specialized cameras that it uses to scan the sky for planets within a range of about 300 light-years. It's called the TESS telescope, and it's equipped with the most advanced planet hunting technology available. It was launched back in 2018 and has already found over 170 confirmed exoplanets, with 4,700 that are still waiting to be verified. According to NASA, TESS is about the size of a refrigerator. The newly discovered planet has been named TOI-1452b, and it's orbiting a small star in a binary system located inside the Draco constellation. For now, there is no way of knowing for sure if the planet contains life. However, since it sits in the Goldilocks zone, far enough from the sun not to be scorching hot, but close enough to be moderately warm, it could be the perfect environment for creatures to emerge. It has water, more of it than on our own planet, and the temperature is perfect. Scientists agree that if there is anywhere that has life, it's definitely here. The question is, Ancient Jungle Empire. An ancient city deep in the jungle of Cambodia, hidden from the world for centuries, was recently revealed using aerial mapping. You may have heard of the more famous Angkor Wat located in the same region, but this place is newly discovered. It's called Mahendra Parvata, and it's believed to have been the very first capital of the Khmer Empire dating back to around the 9th century. Khmer was one of the greatest empires the world has ever seen, dominating most Southeast Asia up until the 15th century. Cambodians have always lived in this region of the country, called Phnom Kulen, yet these ruins went mostly unnoticed and were concealed deep in the forest. Even though archaeologists have known about the city for quite some time, nobody could go to investigate because it's in such a rural area. It's also littered with landmines left over from the days of the Khmer Rouge. The mapping process started back in 2012 with Damien Evans from the French Institute of Asian Studies. He used the LiDAR scanning technique using lasers fired from airplanes. However, the picture wasn't completed, and the crew had to return in 2015 to do more scans. Today, all of those scans have finally been put together to reveal an ancient landscape in the Jungle Mountains. The city was most likely founded by the first Khmer king, Jayavarman II, although for some unknown reason, the capital didn't last very long. Nobody knows exactly how long it was around, but it was quickly abandoned for the much larger city of Angkor, which in the 9th century was the biggest city in the whole world. The more famous temples of Angkor Wat weren't built until much later, in the 12th century. What do you think happened to this ancient civilization that made them abandon the area so quickly? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Weakling pandas. A strange new discovery has revealed that the last living pandas in Europe were giant weaklings. Researchers examined a pair of fossilized teeth, which were unearthed during a dig in northwestern Bulgaria back in the 1970s. The teeth ended up being placed in storage at the Bulgarian National Museum of Natural History, and nobody ever properly cataloged the teeth, so they were never studied until now. When the museum staff stumbled upon them again years later, they opened up an investigation. Scientists can learn a lot from just a few teeth. For example, the teeth belonged to a species of ancient European panda that had never been documented before. This is a brand new species, a close relative of modern pandas that lived 6 million years ago. They were most likely the last pandas in Europe, and they may have been even bigger than giant pandas still alive in China today. According to paleontologist Nikolai Spasov, who was involved in the study, this new panda shows just how little we still know about the prehistoric world. If these teeth had never been found, we may have never even known about the giant European panda. It was also discovered that these pandas may have been affected by climate change towards the end of the Miocene epoch, roughly 23 to 5.3 million years ago. The new panda, named A. Nikolovi, had weaker teeth than modern-day pandas and ate a strict vegetarian diet. When the Mediterranean Sea dried up about 6 million years ago, the swampy forest in which the giant panda thrived became dry and warm. Plants had a hard time growing, and the pandas couldn't eat anything else because of their weak teeth, and they most likely starved themselves into extinction. Mysterious standing stones. One of the biggest archaeological discoveries in European history happened in May of 2022. In Spain, researchers have uncovered a collection of over 500 standing stones. These huge megalithic stones are all that remain of broken ancient structures or monuments buried partially underneath the earth. There is no trace of what had once stood here except for the broken rocks, which hardly even resembles standing stones anymore. The discovery of the stones was made during a preliminary survey of the terrain, which was supposed to be used for an avocado plantation. Instead of becoming a plantation, this is now one of the most important archaeological sites in Europe. According to local archaeologist José Antonio Linares, the stones are most likely from the 5th millennium BC, making them about 7,000 years old. These newly uncovered relics are believed to be older than Stonehenge, and the site is just as big, if not bigger. It's the largest collection of standing stones on the Iberian Peninsula, but they are still a far cry from France's Karnak site, which is home to more than 3,000 of these giant stones. Unfortunately, this discovery is so recent that we still don't know everything about it. Researchers have estimated that it will take them at least 4 years to reveal all the stones, and even then, they still need to survey the surrounding area and extract them all before they can uncover the secrets that these stones hold. Jurassic Fish. On a farm in England, researchers came across the fossilized remains of gigantic marine reptiles and horrifying fish from the Jurassic period. These fossils are over 183 million years old, discovered buried under the soft soil on the outskirts of Gloucestershire in the Cotswolds. Over 180 fossils were dug out of the dirt, including the remains of prehistoric squids, gigantic fish, and impressive marine reptiles. By far, the scariest fossil found during the dig is that of the Pachycormus. It's an extinct type of ray-finned fish, and its fossil is so spectacular it looks like it's not even real. It's three-dimensional, with the fish's perfectly preserved head rising out of the rock like a pop-up book. It looks like a trophy you might put above the fireplace, or like one of those singing fish head plaques. The fossil is so immaculate you can still see the eyes of the fish, the imprint of its fins, and its rows of jagged teeth. Scientists also discovered the remains of soft tissues such as scales. The prehistoric reptiles and other Jurassic monsters are all amazing. However, the 3D fossil is unlike anything ever found before. Fossils are almost always two-dimensional, with the imprint of the animals squished flat against a rock. Researchers believe that as soon as the fish died, it was rapidly buried underneath ocean sediments, which protected it for millions of years. But how it managed to maintain its 3D shape is still a mystery. Graves of gold. Archaeologists in Romania struck gold when they dug up a prehistoric grave in Bihor County, Crișana. Researchers were looking at an old site that once belonged to the Titsa Polgar culture, a group of early humans who flourished in Eastern Europe during the Copper Age about 6,500 years ago. The remains were identified as belonging to an extremely wealthy woman. When archaeologists opened her grave for the first time since roughly 4,500 BC, they found a small cache of 169 gold rings, plenty of copper bracelets, and about 800 mother-of-pearl beads. This woman was obviously filthy rich in gold, yet nobody knows who she was. It was concluded from their research that she was most likely the leader of a local clan, or she was the wife of a local ruler. The gold had almost definitely come from the Transylvanian archipelago, and the beautifully shining rings would have been put in her hair as decorations. She could have looked like a golden princess in life, adorned with more jewelry than seems humanly possible. How she died or what happened to the Titsa Polgar culture is still a mystery that scientists are trying to figure out. The life of a shepherd. A team of archaeologists working under the Israel Antiquities Authority examined the remains of a skeleton found in a dark and dismal cave in the Judean desert. The skeleton was originally found about 30 years ago, but the researchers wanted to take a closer look and use more advanced technology in order to uncover more secrets from the past. When they analyzed the bones of this individual, they were able to gain remarkable insight into his ancient lifestyle. They were able to create a full history around this guy, who they believed was a Judean shepherd who lived and died sometime between 4500 and 3900 BC. The archaeologists also examined a few different artifacts that were found with the dead shepherd. The man's sandals showed that they had been crafted from cowhide, and from the substance stuck to the bottom of them, they were able to determine that the shepherd had been walking through the dung of domesticated animals. This most likely would have been a daily occurrence for someone in his profession. Looking at his bones, the scientists made all kinds of interesting observations. He had horrible teeth, which proved he may have suffered from malnutrition, yet his bones were thick and strong. He was a physically active and muscular man, but was riddled with health issues by the time he hit 30. He died at around 40 years old, which would have been quite average for the time, and they determined that he had suffered a broken leg shortly before.
Alien signals. In June of 2022, China's science ministry claimed that they picked up signals on one of their telescopes that may have come from an alien civilization. It was a pretty bold claim, one backed up by scientists at Beijing Normal University. They said that these signals were identified using the country's Sky Eye telescope, and that these signals appeared to be very suspicious. The signals were so suspicious that researchers began looking into possible traces of intelligent civilizations somewhere else in the universe, or rather in the more immediate cosmos. Zhang Tongji, chief scientist of a Chinese extraterrestrial civilization search team, said the electromagnetic signals picked up by the telescope differ drastically from any previously captured signals. And while the researchers in China are desperately seeking an answer to the mysterious signals, they have also admitted that it could just be radio interference. There is no definitive way yet to tell if we've actually found a civilization just like ours living on a different planet thousands of light years away. But there's another mysterious thing that happened. Shortly after the report came out by the official Ministry of Science, the report was removed from China's state-backed website with no explanation. But it was already too late. It had been redistributed by news outlets all over the world. The truth of the Black Death. Scientists have just made a rather bizarre discovery involving the Black Death. It's still considered to be the deadliest epidemic in human history, but it may not have been killing people as indiscriminately as previously believed. Until 2022, researchers were convinced that everyone was at equal risk to be killed by the plague. And it made sense considering the plague wiped out roughly 75 million people between 1347 and 1351. But according to Sharon DeWitt, a biological anthropologist from the University of Albany, the Black Death killed people a lot more like how COVID-19 kills people. It specifically targeted humans that were at high risk. What that means is that people who were already weakened by some other affliction and who were too weak to fight off the infection would be the ones who died. This information didn't come easily. Sharon and her colleagues had to study over 490 skeletons from the East Smithfield Black Death Cemetery in London. The scientists looked at the bones of these skeletons, searching for any indication of frailty, and what they found was that the people who were killed by the plague were already unhealthy. These people were vulnerable, had poor nutrition, compromised immune systems, and very little ability to fight the disease. It goes to show that people in the Middle Ages were generally unhealthy and maybe deprived of nutrients. It was this general poor condition of their bodies that caused Europe to be nearly wiped off the map. Giants on Europa. There may just be gigantic sea monsters swimming in the chilly waters on Jupiter's ice moon Europa. We haven't technically discovered any monsters yet, but scientists are confident there could be abysmal beasts lurking on Jupiter's moon. And here's why. Even in the darkest and most inhospitable regions of Earth, where there is no light, barely any food, and the temperature is only just above freezing, life finds a way to thrive. There are nightmare squids and gigantic isopods, and even killer jellyfish living in the harshest places of the ocean. And now, here's where Europa comes in. According to Tim Schenk, A biologist with the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute in Massachusetts, life on Europa could resemble life in the deepest places on Earth because the environments are quite similar. Jupiter is the largest planet in our solar system. It's a gas giant and it has quite a few moons. Europa is perhaps the most interesting because scientists with NASA believe that underneath its frozen surface is liquid water. NASA has even seen Europa spit liquid into space, suggesting it actually squirts some of its own water out into the void. As we already know, where there's water, there's almost always life. Given the sheer size of the oceans on Europa, we could be dealing with an entire world of water monsters, sea serpents, and alien creatures. Do you think it's possible giant sea monsters are hiding on Jupiter's moon? Let me know what you think in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Exotic black hole. In a galaxy adjacent to our own, astronomers have discovered something absolutely wild. They have called it a cosmic needle in a haystack. A discovery so astounding it's a miracle it was made at all. The discovery is that of a mysterious, dormant, exotic black hole that was born under curious circumstances. Most black holes are created when a dying star explodes, a supernova, but this one wasn't. It's also not emitting powerful radiation, meaning it isn't swallowing up material like a black hole typically should. It doesn't have a strong gravitational pull. So then, how in the world is this even a black hole? It still has a mass 9 times greater than the Sun. It's hanging out in the Tarantula Nebula, about 160,000 light-years from Earth. It also appears to be orbiting with an extremely luminous hot blue star that has a mass of over 25 times the Sun, making it larger than the black hole. These two objects make up a binary system, and it's all a little bizarre. The reason it was so difficult to identify this black hole is because it doesn't interact with its surroundings. Normally, astronomers can see a black hole because it sucks the light out of everything near it, but that's not the case with this one. This is the first time astronomers have actually identified something like this, and it took them 6 years to find. It was most likely created by the collapse of a star at the end of its life cycle without an explosion. It's a dark hole in the universe that doesn't gobble up everything near it. It's just a swirling pocket of nothing without the deadly gravitational forces like most black holes. The artificial star. Not only is China on the lookout for alien civilizations, but they are also busy creating an unlimited energy source right here on Earth. China has created an artificial sun, and in 2022, it broke the record for the longest sustained nuclear fusion ever. According to Smithsonian Magazine, China's artificial sun superheated plasma to reach a temperature of 126 million degrees Fahrenheit. The plasma then maintained that temperature for 17 minutes straight. Let's break down how hot that is for a second. 126 million degrees Fahrenheit is roughly 5 times hotter than the sun. Not the surface of the sun, which radiates 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit, but the core of the sun, which burns at only 27 million degrees Fahrenheit. That means that here on our planet, in China, there is an artificial star that can create more heat and energy than the actual sun, the very thing responsible for all life on Earth. The machine is called Experimental Advanced Superconducting Tokamak. It's been in operation since 2006 and could very well solve the planet's energy crisis. Nuclear fusion could be the cleanest energy source since it replicates the physics of the sun by merging atomic nuclei to create large amounts of energy into electricity. It's a process which requires no fuel at all, which leaves behind no nuclear waste, and doesn't require a big, ugly nuclear power plant. China is at the forefront of this technology, creating their own stars contained in machines of metal. One day, these machines could be responsible for limitless clean energy. The balancing rock. NASA's Perseverance roves landed on the surface of Mars on February 18, 2021. Since then, the robot has been busy exploring an area known as the Jezero crater. This crater was made when something smashed into the surface of the planet over 3.5 billion years ago. According to NASA scientists, Shortly after the crater was made, it may have been filled with water or a lake teeming with microbial life. That's a pretty big deal considering all life on Earth started the exact same way. Microbial specimens floating around in a great big petri dish. Thanks to the rover, scientists have already found evidence of ancient rivers flowing into the crater. This suggests that billions of years ago, Mars was a very different place. It was blue and maybe even green, although that hasn't been proven yet. And this leads us to the balancing rock. The Perseverance sent a picture back to NASA of a rock balanced almost perfectly on top of a boulder. The rock appears to be about the size of a bowling ball. The mystery is that nobody knows how the rock got into such a precarious position. It looks as though someone had balanced it there on purpose. Perhaps an alien living somewhere on the Martian surface. Of course, geologists have been quick to denounce the discovery as nothing but a freak phenomenon. Weathering and erosion could have caused the rock to morph into a circular shape to make it look as though it's balancing. Even if that's true, it's still another awesome discovery from the Red Planet. The James Webb Telescope. The James Webb Space Telescope has made a big splash in the scientific community, and people are getting excited about space again. Just 1 week after NASA released the first images from the James Webb Space Telescope, it made its first major discovery. Astronomers say that the telescope has potentially allowed them to view the most distant galaxy anyone has ever seen. We have now taken a picture of the oldest galaxy ever found, and it dates back 13.5 billion years. What this means is that the galaxy formed 300 million years following the birth of the universe, or the Big Bang. It's one of the first galaxies to ever exist, and we took a picture of it. Now here's some interesting information. The age of a particular galaxy is determined by something called redshift. As the universe expands outward in all directions, the wavelength of light becomes stretched deeper into the red spectrum. The more red the image is, the farther the galaxy is from where we are. And that's how this new galaxy's age was determined. The death of the paddlefish. The Chinese paddlefish has officially been declared extinct. In one of the bleakest discoveries of the year, the International Union for Conservation of Nature confirmed in July of 2022 that the Chinese paddlefish is gone. It was last seen in the wild in 2003 and is now, beyond any doubt, completely gone from our planet. And that's not all the IUCN discovered. They completed a comprehensive investigation on the state of sturgeon and paddlefish worldwide, and it's not good. 26 of the remaining species of both kinds of fish are under threat of extinction, with 2/3 critically endangered. This was a pretty big fish too. The Chinese paddlefish was native to the Yangtze River. It grew to be over 23 feet long, and it was a truly amazing creature. In fact, scientists say it had been around since the lower Jurassic period, meaning it had lived with dinosaurs 200 million years ago. But now, thanks to overfishing, the construction of a dam, and a steady decline in China's wild places since the 1980s, the Chinese paddlefish is no longer. The fish had survived the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs, only to be killed off by humanity. Exposed glacier rocks. In 2022, the Canadian city of Victoria, the capital of British Columbia, was experiencing some very low tides. The receding water was exposing all kinds of cool stuff along the shore, like a giant slab of granite at a rocky beach near the Chinese cemetery in Oak Bay. But according to University of Victoria professor Edwin Nissen, this was no ordinary piece of granite. It was a chunk of rock that had traveled hundreds of miles from northern Vancouver on a glacier to reach the beach in Victoria, and it did it between 10,000 to 20,000 years ago. The rock began its travels during the Pleistocene era, which was during the Ice Age. Near the end of that time, there were enormous glaciers covering everywhere from the coastal mountains of British Columbia to Vancouver Island and out into the Pacific Ocean. It was a gigantic ice sheet, and it was rapidly melting. Over the course of roughly 10,000 years, the consistent melting of the glacier ripped rocks up from the surface and sent them sliding along its bulk like kids going down a water slide. As the glaciers melted, huge chunks of rock ended up hundreds of miles away from where they had started. And that brings us back to the giant hunk of granite in Oak Bay. It's an igneous rock that made it all the way from Vancouver to the beach of Victoria, which is a pretty impressive trip for an inanimate object. The domestication of olives. Scientists in Israel have discovered where olives were first domesticated. Researchers from the University of Tel Aviv recently revealed that 7,000 years ago, inhabitants of the Jordan Valley domesticated olives for the first time. That might not sound that interesting, but olives have been a staple in world cuisine since biblical times and have been eaten around the world for thousands of years. Yet nobody was really sure where the first olive tree grew. Not until now. It's an exciting discovery comparable to finding where the first apple was grown. According to Dr. Daphne Langut, the team's study leader, they discovered the first domesticated olive trees by looking at charcoal remains. The thing is that even when trees are burned down to nothing but charcoal, modern scientists can still identify them based on anatomic structure. And since olive trees grow wild in Israel but not wild in the Jordan Valley, somebody must have brought them here. 7,000 years ago, somebody in Israel realized that they could take a tree from one place, bring it to a new place, and grow whatever kind of plants they wanted. This was an incredible revelation, considering people weren't really even building cities back then. The olive tree would have been planted by primitive humans outside a prehistoric village. They were basically Stone Age gardeners and the world's first botanists, domesticating trees before they had even invented the wheel. Thanks for watching! Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time!